Raise your hand if you can't hear me, because I'll try to yell. I have to start by saying that I was fortunate to go to the Clark School with Katie's mom a long time ago.
Who was that?
Her name was Pat Buchanan.
Yep.
Yeah. A whole bunch of other Buchanans were at that school as well. I'll start at the beginning. My dad was born and raised in Chicago, went to Harvard. My mom was born and raised in Plainfield, New Jersey, went to Smith College. My dad worked at a company in Philadelphia called the Bud Company. They made Vistadome railroad cars and airplanes, stuff like that. May of 1949, he said, I'm going to be a rancher. He didn't know which end of a cow got up first. He shopped for ranches in the West, Montana, Gunnison, ended up coming here, bought this place. He came out, my uncle Stanton Fetcher, that's why it's Fetcher Brothers, wanted to do the same thing. So they bought this place in the ranch in Clark in September. We were here October 30th, 5 days before my second birthday, and became ranchers. It's incredible when I think of the history of this, because here they are, plunked from downtown suburban Philadelphia to Clark, Colorado, where you went to town once a month, if you're lucky. My mom's the hero.
Oh, yeah.
She arrived in Clark with 3 little boys under 5.
Oh my God.
She loved it. I did have to ask her once when I was grown up. I said, how did you put up with John Fetcher? And she said, I'm a Quaker. Everything's better tomorrow. So the ranch struggled. They didn't know which end of the cow got up first. The Fetcher brothers learned. I think one of the things that I enjoyed thinking about very much, and I'm glad Ray's here, Ray Hyde, but here they are, 2 Harvard-educated men, not knowing much about ranching, plunked down next to the Bedell family, Orville Bedell, who grew up in the Hans Peak Basin, never went through 8th grade. John Fetcher and Orville Bedell became best friends.
Oh, nice.
And that's because of the sharing of the agricultural business, that they had to share fences, labor, water, all that stuff. I really like thinking about that. I think right now, excuse me, we're struggling a little bit in the upper Elk River Valley with that issue, because the individuals that are buying those property, they're basically coming to get away from neighbors, not to be a neighbor. Mm-hmm. And it's hard mentally for me growing up there to see the change in the upper Elk River Valley. Thank goodness for my mom that kept us, and then we went to the Clark School, where I was valedictorian in my class. I was the only one. But we did well. I am very grateful to Ruth Trogler, who was my 1st through 4th grade teacher, because she gave me a real foundation. I do have to say my dad kept little diary books. He didn't write much in here. He wrote like snow today or cold or 8 calves born. So I'm going through here picking up particular notes, because these go back to 1936 when he lived in Paris, trying to picking out the excuse me, the individual pieces that are important. So I read June 3rd, 1952, cut Jay's finger off.
Oh my God. What do you mean, he cut it off?
Yes. I was out in the field with him when the machine stuck my finger in the wrong place and moved a lever. I made the diary.
How old were you?
I was 4.
Oh my gosh.
But it's the most useless finger you have, so.
Well, it does have a wedding band on it.
No,
the other
it's
one
the
does. So.
yeah.
You're right. You're right. I see what you're saying.
I think the other good, interesting Steamboat thought in terms of Clark is when they moved there, the Fetcher brothers, Stanton was married to Gertrude Fetcher. She was pregnant. So Lincoln Fetcher was born over here in the high school band room in June of 1950. And then my sister Amy was born November in the new hospital. So between the 3 months, the new hospital was open and created. The original ranch that we bought was owned by a guy named J.E. Barbie. J.E. Barbie was founder of Vanity Fair magazine and clothing business. And he lived in Philadelphia as well. There wasn't a connection between the Fetchers and Barbie back in Philadelphia, but he was the owner of the ranch, included our ranch as well as the Round Mountain Ranch and our Hunts Peak Ranch. So the Fetcher brothers negotiated with J. Barbie and finally closed, like I said, in September of 1949. It's interesting, J. Barbie was the first, as my dad would say, deep pocket rancher in Routt County. And he was happy to sell it to us. But the original ranch that we bought at Clark was about 700 acres. And up at Hunts Peak was about 1,500 acres. And as some of you know, there's quite a climate change between Clark and even Hunts Peak. The wives' tale that I grew up with, the snow leaves the valley a day a mile from Hayden to Clark. So when the meadows are bare at Hayden, 30 days later they're bare at Clark. Between Clark and Hunts Peak, it's 2 days a mile, even though it's only 8 miles difference. And it was a real challenge at Hunts Peak property because the original ranch, the Clark Ranch, had to produce all the hay for the cows that would winter because there was too much. It was too hard to keep the cows up at Hunts Peak. I think one of the joys I have of this is the original house of the Hunts Peak Ranch was the Wheeler House, which was homesteaded or owned by the James Wheeler family. And so that's where the John Fetcher family lived in the summer, and the Stanton Fetcher family lived at the Clark Ranch. Actually, another kind of fun thought I have is when we moved to the Hunts Peak Basin, lived in the Wheeler House, our house at Clark was rented, so it was the first Airbnb. We would have these couples, these families come and spend a couple weeks in that house, and they didn't do any work, but they got to have lots of fun. So, remember that in the 1950s, the Airbnb in Clark. The Wheeler House was where, again, my mom being the hero, and when we were there was no electricity, there was no running water. So she loved it. Again, she put up with us, and we had a good time up there. Then let's see what's next. I think another little side note is that my dad being and was scratching its electrical engineering itch, got involved in the Clark Telephone Company. Clark Telephone Company consisted of a crank phone from our ranch, was just the south end north, to Hans Peak in the summer. The road was closed from Clark on in the winter. There's nobody who went up there. So the Clark Telephone Company consisted of John Fetcher and Orville Bedell. and so here's the whole directory for the and we had the dial system became about in Clark in 1954, way before Steamboat had dial. And it was so fun because on the back of this it shows you how to dial the phone. I can pass this around if you like. The Buchanan's name, it's not there, sorry, Katie.
They didn't probably have one. No phones for them.
Yeah. So anyway, it was fun to know we had a dial system and all the people that are the old names on there. So again, the John Fetcher family would live in the Hans Peak Basin. And the ranch truly struggled. I think the Fetcher brothers were sold a bill of goods by the realtor saying that the ranch could run 500 cows and put up 1,000 tons of hay. In reality, it turned out to be half of that. So the ranch struggled. The Stanton Fetcher family, theory, I don't think my Uncle Stanton enjoyed the ranch. He was a physiologist, so he liked the cow part of it, but I don't think he liked the physical labor of feeding. And I think that I remember that Bill and I had to get up and feed the cows on Christmas morning while the Stanton Fetcher family slept in. So I think the Fetcher brothers decided there has to be something different. And basically they discussed this and said, okay, the first one who gets an outside job will leave. And my dad did kind of shop around for another business, another job. But Stanton Fetcher got an offer from a guy named Edsel Keys, who was the doctor who developed the cholesterol heart attack study. So they moved to St. Paul in November of 1962. During that time, my dad, again, theory on my part, needed to scratch that engineering itch. And so he got connected with Jim Temple and Jim said, can you help me build a ski area? My dad, sure, I know how to engineer. And so he became involved with the development of the ski area. Again, I think that, and I have records that prove that our cows paid to build the Christie lift.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank the cows. So, and I went to Steamboat High School, graduated, went to University of Wyoming, said I'm never coming back here to ranch. But then when I think about it again, after I graduated with a degree in animal science from Wyoming, I came home, living in my parents' basement, deciding what I wanted to do. But I look at myself as being fortunate because my dad was so busy building a ski area that I didn't have this patriarch looking over my shoulder saying, you're doing everything wrong here at the ranch. So I had a lot of freedom to make decisions based on my schooling from the University of Wyoming. And I was able to see results from that immediate results. So I think another fun thought is as I became more familiar with the ranch and looked at the homesteaders who were there and the property they had, one of my favorite places on the ranch, which I get to go now for joy instead of jobs, because I have somebody else doing the jobs work, is what we call a McPhee Draw. And that was homesteaded by an individual named McPhee. And he's the one who not only built our barn, but he built Margaret Brown's house. And he and his family lived up there, built this little cabin. What's fascinating to me, as the Werner family lived there, they were living there when Loris was born.
Wow.
In this cabin. And it's this tiny little cabin, but the Werner's dad was working for the owner of the ranch, a guy named Larson, excuse me.
The water's down there.
Where do you see water? What year did he say he came? They all came here.
49.
What? 1920.
49.
49. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a newcomer still. And truly, it's fun when I talk to my neighbors in the lower Elk that have been here 100 years. Oh, you're still newcomers.
Makes you feel young.
Yeah. So I came home and was able to take over the ranch, make the decisions. My dad was building a ski area. The cows were paying for it. And I realized the struggle, particularly of our Hunts Peak property. And so he said, we need to do something. And he promoted, initially in 1964, selling of our Hunts Peak property to this big development. Selling from, first of all, building the dam to build the lake. And then around it would be this fancy development. That didn't happen. He kept promoting it, talked to the Division of Wildlife. Finally, in 1966, they agreed to buy the ranch, not the whole part of it, but about 800 acres of ours. And the dam was built the summer of '67, the lake filled in 1968. And I always say it's a lake, not a reservoir, because there's no reserved water rights in it, just a little bit. So sold that about 800 acres of our Hunts Peak Ranch, which drowned out the Wheeler House, which was sad. But he took that money, went to Switzerland, bought the first gondola, put Steamboat on the map, and then he took that away from him. But again, back to my time on the ranch.
Thank you again.
You sure? You sure? Everybody else say thank you. Or just you?
We all thank you.
So again, my time on the ranch when I was there, I was so lucky to be the one to go up at age 13, 14, live by myself in the Wheeler house to take care of the cows and the fences and the irrigation. And, you know, I was given a 1938 Plymouth pickup to drive. I had to crank it to start it, but it was so much fun. And learned about horses and cows and all that stuff being there. And I do have to mention an individual named Ernie Murphy. He was our foreman. And he lived, when I was younger, he lived in the Wheeler place, and I was his slave. But I have to honestly say that if it weren't for Ernie, we wouldn't be on that ranch, because he taught me the passion for being there. And so I developed that passion through Ernie. I didn't develop it through my dad, because he was an engineer, not a cowboy. So I would, when I got bigger, 14, 15, one of the people that lived with me there once for a while was Dennis Ladnick, which we had lots of fun together. Went out with our 22s to shoot mice. What else do you do? And I again remember very distinctly living there. It snowed in June, which it will do.
Yep.
And getting up and having to go catch the horse and check the cows. And I ride over this little ridge and I see these two things out there. I said, what are those deer doing out there with the cows? And they were two sandhill cranes. The first ones I ever saw. This is like in 1963, 64, something like that. And from then on, I was always looking for sandhill cranes. I've had fun thinking of the animals that I grew up with in that basin that aren't there anymore. Badgers. We had badgers everywhere. The poor dogs were scared to death. And then the new animals that have come in, like antelope and so forth. So it's been a fun thinking on my part of the change, the biological change, the ecological change that happens up there in that basin. Steamboat Lake, like I said, rescued the ranch, which then rescued the ski area. And I think it's been a real asset to the community.
Yes.
Even though it gets crowded, and we still have 700 acres up there, which we run cows with in the summer. So I, again, count myself lucky that my dad was busy building a ski area. My mom was enjoying not having to be so involved in the ranch. They, like I said, do I really want to stay here on the ranch? What am I going to do? And so, you know, between 1969 when I graduated Wyoming and 70s, I said, you know, I think I better go be a truck driver to get away from here for a while. And my foreman at that time was Walt Evans, who was my Wyoming college roommate. And he and his wife were the foreman on the ranch. Pam was pregnant and about to have her second child. Her best friend in junior high was Gail. So Gail came up to meet to help be with Pam. We met and decided to get married 2 weeks later.
Wow. How old were you? How old were you when you made that decision?
We were both over 21.
That's so young. Oh my gosh.
And we got married 5 months later, and that was 53 years ago.
Wow.
So, and again, thank goodness for Gail. Ernie Murphy and Gail kept the ranch in the family because I was gone if I hadn't found Gail. So, and the ranch is doing really well still. We have about 200 cows there. My brother in the back, Bill, he does all the machine work, thank goodness. And we have, at this point, 2 young women running the ranch. They do a lot better job than the men do. They use their head.
Amen.
And so fortunate to have Liz and Shan there. And as I said, and Liz, who's the main manager, she said, let me make decisions, which is the same scenario that I went through with my dad.
Yeah.
That leave me alone, let me make mistakes. And there used to be 2 ways to do things in the ranch, my way and the wrong way. Now there's Liz's way. It's so wonderful. lucky to have that. So, you know, and my other saying now is I get to go up to the ranch for joy, not jobs. I get to go look at the trees that are growing up at our Hunts Peak place after all the lodge poles are cut down. I don't have to rush off and fix fence. I did tell Liz I'll give her 3 fence splices per year, but that's it. Katie, I'm kind of through rambling, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Clark School.
Oh, yeah.
Because the Clark School was about 2 miles from the ranch. That's where we went. We would ski. We would ride our horses to school. We would bike. We would ski jor. We would walk. I remember the fear of walking because I grew up with Margaret Brown right next door. In the spring, we would go and see her baby goats, her baby lambs, and help her. But the fear I had of walking home from Clark School, if I go one way, Donnie Bedell would beat me up. If I went the other way, Mrs. Brown's dog would bite me. So it was always $6 to get home from school. But it
Can
was.
you tell us who Mrs. Brown was?
Mrs. Brown,
Yeah,
Margaret
what was
Brown.
her story? Yeah.
Margaret Brown, she and her husband drove up the Elk River Valley like everybody else and said, I want to live here. And she saw this house, which I can't remember who owned it.
McPhee.
Yeah, McPhee.
Yeah.
Yeah. And drove in and said, would you sell this? And they said, sure. And she and her husband bought it, and they were there 1915 basically, and then he died of 1918 of the flu epidemic. So she ran that operation until her death in 1965. Wow. We leased it. She did 3 homesteads, got land on Round Mountain, and she'd have to build a cabin, live there for 3 months before she got title to that property. Remarkable. And she originally had some cows, but then she couldn't find help, so sheep were easier, so she ran sheep. But it was, again, as a kid, walking by and seeing her shear the sheep, getting in the bags to stamp the wool down in order for her to sell it. A wonderful woman, scared me to death, but a wonderful woman. My mom was very much a good friend with her. And just really lucky that was part of my growing up. Clark School, I think at one point there was the big room, which was grade 5 through 8, and the little room 1st through 4th grade, no kindergarten. So I started 1st grade at age 1, or no, sorry, 5, because my mom needed me out of the house. I do have to tell it, we're, again, very lucky because we have these of my dad's, but we also have these wonderful letters that my mom wrote, because she would write basically every 2 weeks a 2-page typewritten letter to her father back in New Jersey of what was going on at the ranch. So I'm again reading those, and Katie, I need to share them with you because they're remarkable. But I'm reading, you'll laugh, I'm reading a portion of her letters. And Ned is the oldest brother, then Bill, then me. So we're the 3 boys. Ammy's not old enough to go to school. The 3 boys are going to Clark School. And she writes her father, well, Ned is very smart, but he's very lazy. Bill loves to tinker with machinery and clocks and fixing stuff. And Jay has a big head, but there's nothing in it. This is what your mother writes.
Thanks, Mom.
But it was really a joy to go to Clark School. The neighbors we had were all ranching families, obviously. The Clark School went, I think my sister was in 6th grade when the Clark School was shut down. And at one point, believe it or not, there were 32 school districts in Loudoun County.
Wow. 32.
All you needed was 5 parents and 8 kids to start a school district. But that's what they did all over. And you can see a lot, as you know, there's a lot of existing buildings still around. I think Clark was the last one to consolidate into the Steamboat Springs School District. But I came to Steamboat went into 8th grade. Didn't know a soul because I was the only one in my class. So I didn't have any friends here. So it took me a while to create relationships with friends in town. Didn't do any, my after school activity was cow milking because we couldn't do anything and we had to go home and milk the damn cow. And so I didn't do any sports or anything.
How did you get to and from school?
School bus every day.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, you're lucky in that regard. And it's kind of nice that the charter school is now going up at Clark so the kids don't have to ride the school bus and learn all those great languages. But I'm gonna kind of wind down, but I do want to share a couple things. One is that one of my oldest daughter, Molly, and her family are living on the ranch now, but they're not ranching, but they have 3 kids. Sydney's the oldest. She's actually a sophomore at Seton Hall. Collier's a senior in high school, and Joey's freshman. So Joey was going to the Clark School last year. And I was, excuse me, I'm sorry. I was driving him up to school about a year ago this time. And we were talking about stuff in the ranch and so forth. And he looks at me as we're driving by and he says, "Don't let the past pass. That's your job." He ruined my day.
I bet. I had a quick question. Hi, by the way, thanks for coming. You've talked a little bit about how you've studied when the snow melts off the meadow.
Yes.
And how you've been able to really, on a really tangible level, document the effects of climate change up in your area. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Thanks. Yes, for 70 years since we've been there, we've been able to write down the date when the snow melts off a particular meadow. In a quick summary, as in the 50s, that 10-year average was April 22nd. And the variation between the earliest and the latest in that 10-year was about 18 days. In the last decade, the average snow melt was April 10th, so it moved up 10 days, or 12 days. But the variation was 42 days between earliest and latest. So that's what we're experiencing now. Again, back to my dad when he bought the ranch, and I took over. I used to cuss him because he bought the ranch in Clark. And I talked to my peers, and they would say, well, maybe we'll start feeding in January for 3 months. Here we have to plan on feeding from November to May. And I went to a seminar on weather, and the guy was talking about the variation in weather and how it affects Colorado agriculture. There's, hailstorms, there's tornadoes, there's droughts. And he said, and this guy put his finger on Clark, and he said, the most stable weather pattern in the state. And I said to myself, he's right, because every year we get this much snow, every year we get this much grass. And from an agricultural standpoint, I'm dealing with when, not if. And when's a lot easier to plan for than if.
Yeah.
So I quit cussing my dad.
I have a question.
Please.
When you went to high school, did you stay in town? Did you rent a
no.
room? Okay.
Had to
So
go
many
ride the
did.
bus to go milk the cows.
That's just it.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for the
Priorities.
cows.
I have a question too. When you referred to the Brown family,
Yes.
I remember Brown's bookstore in Steamboat.
No.
Do you remember that?
There it was different. Right.
Different family.
Yeah.
Different family. She didn't have any kids.
Yeah. She didn't have any kids.
Yes,
Did you watch her read?
When did your parents move from the ranch to Ski Times Trail?
1976. And again, I think Gail and Molly was born in 75, and we were in what was called the mini house, which is the little house on the ranch. I'll explain it in a minute. And it was too small for, I think, my dad, and I truly, again, my mom, she wanted to be more involved in town stuff with her strings on the mountains passion and her golfing. But on the ranch, the main house, again, another story, the original house that the John Fetcher family lived in was, again, built probably the 30s. And then when we moved out here, the Stanton Fetcher family built the house that's there now in the winter of 49, 50 somehow. I don't know how they did it, but they started it in November and moved into it in March somehow. And then there's the kind of what we call the Foreman house, and then the mini house. The mini house, it's not M-I-N-I, it's M-I-N-N-I-E.
Oh, like mini
And
house.
Minnie was our family au pair that came to the Fetcher family when my dad was 2 weeks old
Oh.
from England. And she was with the Fetchers all this time. And when they moved to the ranch, she came out and visited, and she said, I want to be here. So she had a house built for her, and she was the ranch baker and took care of the chickens and took care of us. So it's in honor of Minnie that it's called the Mini House. So that's where Gail and I originally lived when we were first married, and when Molly was born, that's where we were living. So.
You wanted to talk about the ski tow.
Oh, you're right. How could I forget? Again, back to my dad shopping for ranches. I truly think that Hollison was a major draw for the purchase here because he was a passionate skier.
Oh.
He learned to ski in France. He actually, after Harvard, before he met Mom, he lived in Paris. He worked on welding of stainless steel, which I guess was more of a challenge back then. But he patented stainless steel skis.
Oh.
He has a French patent for those. Anyway, so I think a big draw for this ranch was Hollison. And of course, the second ski area he built in Steamboat was rope tow on the hill at the ranch, run by one of our tractors. I think Bill's always the one who had to climb up the hill to start the tractor to get the rope taken. But it was quite a draw for the community. We would actually have ski meets with the Mount Harris School. They would always beat us with wrestling, but we could beat them skiing. But all the neighbors would come over on the weekend and ride the rope tow and do tricks or whatever is necessary. And it was very fortunate. I will mention that as we went along with the ranch, and I was there raising 3 daughters, we were looking at what's next. We had some new buyers come in, mainly Steve Stranahan, who bought the home ranch. Which was a guest ranch there. So Steve approached us with what we would call the Upper Elk River plan of how that valley could stay the way it is. And Steve was familiar with conservation easements. So we took the time to learn. And a conservation easement is a voluntary restriction on your land in terms of what development you could do. We talked about it as a family. My dad was there like that. Everything he did, ranch was number 1. I would follow quickly up. His water stuff was number 2. He didn't talk much about the ski area. My dad liked to produce things. He liked to take water, make grass, make beef. He liked to take water, make electricity. He considered the ski area more of a service rather than a producing entity. So we learned about conservation easements. In May of 1993, we did a conservation easement on the ranch, which means we gave away all the development rights. We got a little bit of a tax credit for that, but we knew the ranch would never be developed. And that felt good.
Yes.
Out of that grew my interest in this. And the entity we worked with back then was American Farmland Trust, which is a national organization. And they asked me to talk about this, so I went around the country talking about our upriver plan. That led me to learning that we were very lucky to work with AFT because they understood cows and ranches and fences and stuff like that. So I'll wrap up here quickly, Katie. But,
You got lots of time.
But I approached the Colorado Cattlemen's Association about forming a land trust under the auspices of the Colorado Cattlemen. It took me a year of learning, persuading them. And in 1995, so 30 years ago, Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust was formed. And we've worked with, throughout the state, with over 400 ranch families protecting almost 900,000 acres perpetually from development. So that's the other part of my ranch story besides cows, but it's been fun.
What was the elevation at the top of your rope tow?
It's higher than Mount Werner. The ranch is about 7,200 feet, so 7,300 feet. Yeah. It was a challenge to ride. I remember distinctly holding onto the rope, and it's icy and slick, and trying to get a grip to go up. And here comes this slice. And it grabs me and pops me out of my ski boots. And I was probably wearing Ned's ski boots. So it was really, that rope tow was really fun. We've got great pictures of it. So.
Excuse me. Your dad, he was obviously the brains to get this whole thing going. How much did he actually work labor? Because he had a foreman, Ernie. I mean, was he out there doing fencing
All the
and all of
time.
that too?
All the time. He loved his bulldozer.
Was he fencing? Was he fencing in his 90s, as I always pictured? I mean, he just seems like he was a go-getter till
Yeah.
the end of his life.
Probably was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I figured
Yeah.
John Fetcher could
He was always.
fence in
He
his
loved
90s. so
his
fun.
machines.
He was what?
He loved his machines. Yeah.
When there were emergencies such as your finger or having a baby or something, how was that handled? Like, would the doctor come from Steamboat and go all the way up there? It seems like it wouldn't.
Well, with this is funny because, you know, as a 4-year-old, a very clear memory of exactly everything. And so you're up kind of in the north end of the meadows. So, he takes me over to Willette Bedell, who lives nearby. She drives me to Mom. Mom drives me to town.
Oh.
And then in the diary is the notes of the rest of the work he did that day. So, you know, we had to come to town. And the road wasn't paved. It was lucky it was plowed.
It was dirt.
Yeah, it was dirt. In again in this diary, 1952, he made a note, March 27th, 57 inches of snow on the level. That 52 winter was incredible.
Great spring skiing, man.
Yeah. And they ran out of hay, so I know that he had to go to Grand Junction every other day to get hay, get through the winter.
Oh my God.
So, I don't know where the Buchanans were at that point.
Pat was just born. I don't know what they were doing.
I had a question. What did you learn in college that you brought back to the ranch? What changes did you make?
Mainly genetics,
Oh,
population genetics, not molecular genetics, where you can take a genetic base of a herd and move it this way. And at that point, because you didn't do anything different, you had Herefords. Because if you didn't have Herefords up there, you were shunned. And so I learned about how much easier crossbreeding would be using Angus on the Herefords, easier calving, doing stuff like that. I also learned artificial insemination.
that was new.
But it was mainly genetics piece, population genetics. And it paid, it took a while. But
You did that by observing, or did you draw blood and do that?
no, I was mainly looking at data.
Okay.
And I became a real nerd in terms of keeping cattle records. So, you know, we measure the calves every spring, how much they weigh. And so I got records on 15,000 calves. Now what?
Wow.
And how much they weighed, if who their mama and daddy were, and all that stuff, yeah.
Did your dad have any desire or pressure you at all to go back east to go to school, or was he just totally Western by that time? And
My brother, oldest brother, and my sister got that pressure. He was just happy that I was only 2 hours away at the University of Wyoming, so I could come home and. But Ned, my oldest brother, he actually went to Fountain Valley Prep School and then went to Harvard. And then Amy, she was pressured to go east, but she ended up at the University of Wyoming too. She became a veterinarian, not through Wyoming, but. And then Bill joined the Navy, so he was. So there, now I never had that pressure. And, you know, being the third boy, you kind of slip by with lots of stuff, so.
More freedom.
And, you know, the Wyoming was perfect for me because it was small. It was actually the out-of-state tuition was cheaper than in-state at CSU. I was lucky to be part of the University of Wyoming ski team that won the NCAAs in 1968 and 69, right here in Steamboat. Yeah.
That's cool.
Had some really good friends still have those friends from that ski team.
One of the joys of my life was when I started working for John in 1973.
You're lucky.
At the Water District.
Oh, really? Okay,
And taking dictation because we didn't have computers, and I couldn't spell anything, so I always called Simone Oliver over at John Valentine's and how to spell something because John was so precise on spelling.
Okay.
But anyway, he worked Monday, Wednesday, Fridays at the ranch and came into town Tuesdays. So he asked me to come out and see the ranch one day, and I did. And he took me into his shop, and I was just amazed that he had a Sharpie lining of every tool, of everything he owned on his big walls. And he said that if one is missing, then he knows that tool is missing. I mean, if it was blank and the drawing was there, then he knew that someone had taken a tool. They better return it.
And that's Bill's job now.
Is that pegboard still there?
Pardon?
Is that pegboard still there?
The paintings on the wall.
Yeah.
His tool.
That's
No, it was, and it's helpful, believe it or not. I think another little history of thinking back of the ranch, the original buildings were old. They were built for smaller tractors. And as we graduated into better paying equipment, bigger tractors, four-wheel drives and so forth, we needed to update the structures at the ranch. Up at our Hans Peak Ranch, it was all lodgepole that all died from the beetle kill. So we started logging that 25 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that. But part of that was the ability to cut those trees, have on-site sawmill, and we rebuilt all the old buildings at the ranch to take care of bigger equipments from lodgepole from the Hans Peak place. And again, part of the joy I have now is being able to go up there and see where all these trees were cut, which broke my heart. But now there's tons of new lodgepoles coming up everywhere.
Nice.
So it was a really good move. So.
John, how did you heat your home early on?
I think there were gas furnaces, propane furnaces, some wood stoves. Sadly, the original house that Bill and I grew up in until *62 was heated by a coal stove with an old chimney, and then it was a chimney fire that caused it to burn, catch on fire and burn.
When we moved here, we used a Stoker-matic.
Oh, yeah, that was in the middle house. Yeah, Stoker-matic.
What is that?
What is it?
It's a coal-burning stove.
It's coal where they have chunks of coal that feed into it, keeps it burning. Yeah.
But you had a big fire.
We had a
When year
big-
was that? In the 60s?
62, November '62 is when the house burned down, which was really sad.
Yeah.
Because that's my childhood memory house. Is that one?
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jay? Closing thoughts, Jay? You did good.
Don't let the past pass.
Yeah.
One more Joey quote. Life's too short to make your bed.
Who said that?